morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our Sip&Talkers out there, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to Sip&Talk.
Episode 580.
I can't believe it's been 10 days, but I am still struggling to process the number 2026. I really thought this year would start with the usual stuff like, how's my New Year's fitness plan going?
Which is not going, I assume.
Not well. That or, what cool AI robots did everyone see at CES? But instead, you open up social media, and the top trending story is still that Venezuela's Maduro was supposedly snatched up by U.S. forces.
It's true. The first week of 2026 has been a crash course in Autocratic Survival Crisis 101. It's been wild.
Absolutely.
You have the action in Caracas on January 3rd, and now all this turmoil erupting on the streets of Tehran. And the timing? It's just over a year since the Assad regime fell in Syria back at the end of 2024.
That can't be a coincidence.
I don't think it is. It's not just random noise. This feels more like a geopolitical resonance, a kind of echo.
So that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to try and unpack what's happening, especially with all these rumors swirling that Iran's theocracy is, well, on the verge of collapse.
And more importantly, what that would mean for its, let's call them authoritarian siblings, China and Russia.
All right, let's jump in. Today's topic, Iran's 2026 domino. The people's warning to China and Russia.
It's a spicy title.
It is a spicy title, Joe. And it feels right. I was just scrolling through the latest report from the ISW, the Institute for the Study of War, and they're saying yesterday, January 9th, there were 156 separate protests across Iran.
156? That's not a protest movement. That's a nationwide uprising.
It really is. And it gets crazier. There are rumors that Tehran's national bank, Bank Melli, had a massive bank run and has completely halted withdrawals. I mean, that's like the opening scene of a disaster movie.
It's a financial and political tsunami hitting at the exact same time. And, the word domino in the title is perfect. It's not just geographical, it's psychological.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the Times just reported yesterday that there are rumors, and we should stress these are rumors, that Supreme Leader Khamenei has a plan B to flee to Russia.
Wow.
Even if that's not true, the fact that it's a believable rumor tells you everything about the stability of the regime. And if that domino falls, for a place like Beijing, which is all about performance legitimacy.
Meaning we deliver economic growth, so you don't need democracy.
Exactly. And for Moscow, which is already so bogged down in its war, this isn't some distant fireworks show. It is a blaring alarm right on their doorstep.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What is actually making the Iranian regime so vulnerable right now? It feels like we need to understand the storm in Tehran before we can track the shockwaves.
I think that's the right way to approach it because it really is a perfect storm. You have basically three core pressures hitting all at once: a total economic collapse, a leadership vacuum, and this profound external isolation.
Let's start with the economy, because that feels like the most visceral pressure point for regular people.
It's the most visceral, and it's honestly hard for us to even comprehend the scale of it. This isn't just an economic downturn, it's a survival crisis.
So what are the numbers?
Okay, so based on reports from places like Bloomberg and Eurasia Review, let's start with the currency. The Iranian rial. It has hit a historic low, an absolutely staggering one. It's now over 1.4 million reals to a single U.S. dollar.
Wait, say that again? 1.4
million. 1.4 million, yeah.
For $1. I mean, that's not currency devaluation. That's currency evaporation. How fast did that happen?
The speed is what's so terrifying. To give you some context, back in 2020, the rate was closer to 200,000 reals to the dollar.
Okay.
So in less than 6 years, you've seen an 80% loss in value. It's not slow decay, it's a complete catastrophic meltdown. And that, of course, has a direct impact on prices.
Right, at the grocery store.
At the grocery store, at the pharmacy, everywhere. The official inflation rate is soaring past 70%. So your money is worthless and everything costs, 70% more than it did last year.
So the protests we're seeing now, they're different from the ones a few years ago about the hijab, the headscarf.
Fundamentally different. Those were about religious mandates, about social freedom. These are about, can my family eat tonight? Can we afford medicine? Can we keep the lights on? It's about basic survival.
It reminds me of that saying, if you can't afford the pork chop in the lunchbox, none of the other data matters.
That's a great way to put it. Look at their subsidy level. The regime has this low-income support program, right? The monthly payment is about $12 US.
$12.
$12. With 70% inflation and a worthless currency, that $12 is. It's basically an insult. It's useless. And that's the moment the social contract just shatters. The state has completely failed its end of the bargain.
And when people panic, the state panics. Which brings us to the information blackout.
Exactly. The regime's first move when the bank runs started getting serious, shut it down. On January 8th, internet connectivity across the entire country dropped to 1%.
1%. They just tried to pull the plug on the whole country.
They did, to stop people from coordinating, to stop the videos of bank runs from going viral.
Yeah.
But it didn't work.
How do we know?
Because people are getting information out through satellite comms, and those reports confirm the bank runs are ongoing and that withdrawals are still frozen. The state tried to blind its people, but it can't contain the crisis anymore. It's too big.
It's like a CEO who ignores customer complaints until the bank just cuts off the credit line. The problem is real, whether you acknowledge it or not.
That's a perfect analogy. Okay, so that's the economic fire. Now let's add the second ingredient to this perfect storm. The leadership vacuum.
The man at the top.
The man at the very top. Supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei. He's 86 years old, and he has not been seen in public for several days.
And the rumors are flying.
They are flying. Persistent rumors of severe health problems, cognitive impairment. Some say he's in a coma. In a system like a theocracy, where all power is personalized in one quasi-divine figure. His absence creates a political black hole.
And you know what they say about vacuums.
Nature abhors them, and so do power-hungry elites. The second he appears to be incapacitated, everyone starts jockeying for position.
So is there any evidence that's happening?
Yes, clear evidence. We're hearing about the formation of a new defense council. And the key thing is, this council is reportedly making decisions that bypass the supreme leader.
They're cutting him out.
It's a rapid depersonalization of power. They're trying to keep the machinery of the state running without its ideological core, without its driver, but all that does is signal weakness. It invites infighting between, say, the IRGC and the old guard clerics.
So the economy is collapsing, the leadership is in chaos. Which brings us to the third pressure point. Their external situation, they're basically alone.
More alone than they've been in decades. Their entire regional project is crumbling just as fast as their domestic economy.
And the biggest blow there had to be Syria.
Without a doubt. The fall of the Assad regime in late 2024 was the single most damaging strategic loss for Iran.
Why was Syria so important for them?
It was the linchpin, the centerpiece of their so-called axis of resistance. Syria was the physical land bridge that allowed Iran to move weapons, fighters, and money overland directly to Hezbollah in Lebanon and other proxies.
It was their highway for projecting power.
Their main highway. And now it's been permanently closed. That supply chain is gone.
And this came right after their own defenses were hit.
Right. Remember the joint U.S.-Israeli strikes on their nuclear facilities back in June of 2025?
Of course.
Those strikes weren't just about degrading the program. They were about sending a message. The message was, your deterrence is gone. We can hit you whenever we want, and you can't stop us.
So their sword is broken and their shield is broken.
A very good way to put it. And when that happens, and when your economy is in free fall, you can't pay your friends anymore.
The proxies.
The proxies. Groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, their fading capacity, their operational ability has been seriously reduced. Why? Because the money pipeline from Tehran, funded by the rial, has dried up. The internal collapse is causing an external collapse. They're strategically isolated, and their entire regional security plan is just shattered.
Wow. Okay, when you lay it all out like that, it's not just one thing going wrong, it's everything going wrong all at the same time.
It's a cascade failure. And that's where it gets really interesting, because we have to ask, is power itself destined to collapse when it's placed above the people?
That feels like the big question, doesn't it? After watching what's happening in Caracas and Tehran,
Yeah.
It feels like no matter how strong a regime looks on paper, eventually the people just say, we're done.
It's the lesson of the Soviet Union, really. And political scientists have a term for it. It's called the end of preference falsification.
Preference falsification. Okay, break that down for us.
It's simple, really. Think about the old Soviet model. Publicly, everyone cheers at the May Day parade. They read Pravda. They say the party line.
But privately, in their kitchens.
Privately, behind closed doors, they all know the system is a corrupt, broken joke. Preference falsification is when everyone, out of fear, pretends to support the regime while hiding what they truly believe.
So the regime's stability is basically built on a collective lie. It depends on everyone keeping their mask on.
A stability built entirely on fear and pretense. And the tipping point, the moment the whole thing shatters, is when some big trigger event happens. For the USSR, it was Chernobyl. For Iran in 2026, It's this economic collapse combined with the leadership vacuum.
What does the trigger do?
It reveals a crucial, terrifying truth to everyone at the same time. It makes them realize, my neighbor thinks the exact same way I do.
And suddenly you're not alone.
You're not alone. And that individual fear instantly transforms into collective anger. The masks all come off at once, and you have a revolution on your hands.
That must be an incredibly powerful moment, realizing you're not an isolated dissident, but part of a huge, angry majority.
It's everything. And this is what's so fascinating about the modern era. You have these regimes that think they can beat this with technology. They have what we call the high-tech Soviet dilemma.
Digital authoritarianism, AI surveillance, social credit scores, all that.
Exactly. They think they can surveil their way out of a collapse. But Iran is proving the ultimate flaw in that logic.
Which is?
If you can't deliver on basic performance legitimacy, if you can't even afford that $12 monthly subsidy, then all the AI monitoring in the world doesn't matter. You can't use an algorithm to convince a starving person that they're prosperous. The system is exposed as a fraud.
It all comes back to that high-pressure cooker analogy you mentioned.
It does. When power is just about downward suppression, not upward authorization from the people, you're not governing. You're just sitting on a pressure cooker. And eventually it's going to blow.
And we can see that in how the protests themselves have changed.
The motivation is completely different. In the past, the protests were about demanding correction, reform this rule, stop doing that. Now
they're questioning the regime's very right to exist.
It's an existential crisis. And you can see it in who is protesting. It's not just students anymore. We're seeing the merchants of the Grand Bazaar in Tehran. These are historically conservative, pro-government business people.
When the capitalists turn on you,
you're in deep trouble. Factory workers are striking, teachers, oil workers. The base of support is just crumbling away.
And the slogans are getting more extreme, I've read.
Extremely. There are reports of people shouting for the return of the Pahlavi monarchy.
The Shah's family. But they were overthrown in 1979.
Almost 50 years ago. The fact that people are so desperate that they're looking back to a long-dead system tells you how completely discredited the current one is. When the government can't feed you, its claims of divine authority sound pretty hollow.
So this all points to these deep structural flaws in authoritarianism itself. It's why they seem to collapse so suddenly, so disjointedly, while a struggling democracy might just, slowly decay.
The difference is crucial, and it comes down to three basic design flaws that are baked into every authoritarian system. First, they prize efficiency and central control, which means they systematically cut off their own information feedback loops.
The leader lives in a bubble.
A bubble of good news. No one wants to tell the boss the economy is really tanking, so the people at the top become completely disconnected from reality.
Okay, what's the second flaw?
Second, they prioritize loyalty over competence. You promote the guy who is the most loyal to the party, not the one who actually knows how to run, say, the central bank or the national oil company.
And over time, the entire bureaucracy just degrades.
It rots from the inside out. And the third flaw is the most ironic one. They prioritize stability through repression, but that doesn't actually get rid of risks. It just delays them. It lets them build up underground until they all explode at once in a nonlinear way.
The state becomes hollowed out.
Precisely. It transforms from a real thing, people, institutions, legitimacy, into a fake thing. Just a power machine running on fear and propaganda. And when the fear stops working and the money to run the machine dries up, the whole thing is just an empty shell waiting to fall over.
So we get the theory, we understand the vulnerability, but let's check the receipts. All these crazy rumors are flying around. Common Eye on a private jet, the monarchy coming back. Is this the real deal? Or is it just pre-collapse gossip?
That's the critical question. And we have to be really careful here to separate credible intelligence from psychological warfare.
So that rumor about Common Eye's jet to Moscow.
I would say that is almost certainly psychological warfare. Think about who that rumor is designed to target.
The security forces on the street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
IRGC soldier, the besieged militiaman. You want them to think, wait a minute, the guy I'm risking my life for already has his escape plan. Why should I stick my neck out? It's a classic tactic to demoralize the enforcers.
So it doesn't have to be true to be effective.
It just has to be plausible. And the same goes for the restoration fantasy, as I call it. The idea of the Pahlavi monarchy returning. It's circulating like crazy in diaspora communities, and you hear it in some protests, but is there any real evidence it represents a national consensus? Not really.
So on the timing, we can't say it's going to collapse tomorrow.
No. We have to be cautious. There's no credible evidence of an immediate total structural collapse. These things are almost always messy, drawn out, struggles, not a clean fireworks show.
Okay, if it's not a sudden explosion, then we have to talk about the group that will manage the chaos one way or another. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
They are the single most important actor in this whole drama, and calling them just a military force is a massive understatement. They are the deep state. They are the core infrastructure of power in Iran.
And they have a massive economic footprint, right?
Massive is the word. Oh. Analysis from the Carnegie Endowment suggests the IRGC controls somewhere between 30 and 50% of the entire Iranian economy.
Half the economy? How is that even possible? What do they control?
It's a huge, opaque business empire. They're in everything. Construction, telecom, energy. They run ports and major infrastructure projects. Crucially, they control a lot of the shadow economy that gets around sanctions.
So they're getting rich while the country goes broke?
Incredibly rich. The top generals have built personal fortunes that are completely separate from the government's official budget. But wait, I have to challenge you on that because you're painting them as purely self-serving. What about the true believers? The hardcore ideologues in the Guard?
That's a great point. And yes, there are absolutely deep ideological roots there. But what we've seen over the last decade is that for the top brass, the survival logic has become overwhelmingly financial.
So for the generals, it's about protecting their assets.
Think about it. If there's a real democratic revolution, what happens to them? Their vast, ill-gotten fortunes get liquidated. Their foreign bank accounts are frozen, and they face international indictments for human rights abuses. So their personal survival is tied to the survival of the system.
The survival of the system of control, yes. Even if they have to jettison the religious theocrat shell of that system.
Which means the most likely outcome isn't necessarily democracy.
I think the most likely scenario is what you call a militarized transition. The IRGC steps in, maybe they strip away the old revolutionary language, put a technocrat in charge.
And run things from behind the scenes.
Exactly. They might put Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, in power as a figurehead to create some continuity. Or they might just install a straight-up military junta. But their number one priority will be preserving the power structure that keeps them rich and safe.
So it's less a revolution and more just, rearranging the authoritarian deck chairs.
It could be. But even the IRGC has an Achilles heel. There is one thing that even the most ruthless dictatorships fear above all else.
Defection.
Defection. The Economist has written about this for years. The precise moment a dictatorship falls is when the security forces get the order to shoot their own people, and they refuse.
Once you lose your monopoly on violence, it's over.
It's over. The game is up. And the intelligence on this from inside Iran is deeply alarming for the regime. We are getting more and more reports of anti-command behavior.
Meaning soldiers refusing orders.
Soldiers being arrested for explicitly refusing to fire on protesters. And that loss of control over your own guns, that is the ultimate nightmare scenario for every authoritarian leader, including those watching very closely from Moscow and Beijing.
Okay, let's make that connection. Let's talk about the domino effect. Why is the chaos in Tehran more than just a regional headline for Putin and Xi Jinping?
Because the collapse of a key strategic partner sends a shockwave through their own survival plans, both militarily and ideologically.
Let's start with Russia. For them, this is a flank collapse right on their southern border.
It's a catastrophic strategic loss. People forget how dependent Russia has become on Iran militarily.
For the war in Ukraine.
Specifically for the war in Ukraine. We're talking about the Shahed drones. We're talking about ballistic missile technology, all essential for Russia's ability to conduct long-range strikes if that supply chain gets cut off because there's a new pro-Western government in Tehran.
Putin has a massive logistics problem overnight.
A huge one. And it's not just about the hardware, it's about reputation. Russia sells itself as the great global patron of authoritarian stability. If they can't even prop up a core ally like Iran, that whole brand gets seriously tarnished.
And then there's just the geography of it all.
Exactly. If Iran flips and becomes pro-Western, Russia suddenly loses its key buffer state in the Caucasus and Central Asia. It creates a massive new zone of instability right on its southern flank, forcing them to divert troops and resources away from Ukraine to deal with it.
Which they absolutely cannot afford right now.
Not at all.
What about the rumor of Khamenei fleeing to Moscow? Would Putin even take him?
It's a great question, and it's highly debatable. I mean, sure, there might be some sanctuary agreement on paper, but Putin would have to weigh the cost. Sheltering a deposed, toxic leader against the chance of totally rupturing relations with whatever new government comes next.
He might just decide Khamenei is too much baggage.
I think he'd cut him loose in a heartbeat if it suited his strategic interests. Loyalty only goes so far in that world.
Okay, let's pivot to China. They're farther away geographically, but Iran is just as critical for them, just in a different way.
For Beijing, this is what you could call an ideological contagion and a massive security trap.
Let's start with the practical stuff, energy.
Energy is huge. Around 90% of Iran's crude oil exports go to one country, China.
90%.
It's millions of barrels a day, often at a discount because Iran is under sanctions. Any disruption to that flow is an immediate threat to China's economic stability.
So chaos in Iran means potential factory shutdowns in China.
Absolutely. And it's not just the oil itself. It's the shipping lanes, the Strait of Hormuz. Any instability there threatens China's entire Belt and Road Initiative, their grand plan for connecting Asia to Europe. Iran was supposed to be a key hub in that plan.
So losing Iran as a stable partner doesn't just cut off an oil tap. It messes up their whole anti-U.S. strategy in the Middle East.
It unravels a key pillar of that strategy. But honestly, the economic and strategic problems, they're secondary.
To what?
To the ideological threat, the fear of contagion. You have to remember, Xi Jinping is obsessed with the collapse of the Soviet Union. He gives speeches about it to party members all the time.
The lesson being, never lose control.
Never, ever lose control. For the Chinese Communist Party, their entire claim to legitimacy is built on providing stability and growth. The idea that a grassroots color revolution could topple a heavily armed, entrenched authoritarian regime like Iran's, that is their worst nightmare.
Because it proves it can be done.
It proves repression isn't a permanent guarantee of survival. It shows that the model is vulnerable.
And they think they can use their tech, their surveillance state, to stop that from ever happening in China.
That's the great gamble of digital authoritarianism. But what Iran is showing is what we can call the digital rift. Their high-tech surveillance state, it's powerful, but it completely fails if the performance legitimacy, the economy collapses first.
You can't surveil your way out of a famine.
Exactly. The digital tools can monitor compliance, but they can't manufacture prosperity. And when the prosperity disappears, the whole system is revealed to be a very brittle cage.
So zooming all the way out here for a final thought, this has been a pretty intense look at how these systems fail. Is what we're seeing in Iran just a new, more brutal phase of how dictatorships survive? Or is it, the end point for this whole model?
It really brings us back to this fundamental, unyielding paradox, the paradox of autocratic survival. And it's a trap they can't seem to escape in the 21st century.
Remind us what that loop is.
Okay, so to stay in power, an autocracy needs economic growth to keep people happy. But to get real, modern economic growth, you need things like information flow, creative freedom, talent.
Things that are poison to a centralized top-down control system.
The very things that destroy autocratic control. They are constantly sawing off the branch they are sitting on. They have to choose between getting rich and potentially facing a democratic collapse, or staying poor and facing a violent collapse.
It's a structural dead end.
It is. Any state that treats power as an end in itself, rather than a tool that's temporarily loaned to it by the people, will eventually lose the core ingredient of the state, the people themselves.
And that failure isn't just one protest. You're saying it's when three specific conditions all happen at once.
Right. The real alarm bell for every one of these regimes is when these three things align. First, the economic narrative bankrupts. The government completely loses the ability to spin the bad news. People just know, in their bones, that the system itself is the problem.
The propaganda stops working. Okay, what's number two?
The cost of fear escalates. The amount of violence the regime has to use just to maintain basic order starts to rise exponentially. It becomes unsustainable. You can't arrest everyone.
And the third, which goes back to the IRGC.
The elites lose faith. This is the kill shot. When the generals, the oligarchs, the top bureaucrats start prioritizing their own survival over the regime's survival, when they're more scared of international sanctions than they are of the supreme leader, that's when the system begins to eat itself.
I think those analogies you mentioned earlier are a great way to kind of nail this down for everyone.
Let's run through them. Analogy 1, the CEO who serves himself. The company is supposed to serve customers, but the CEO decides customer complaints are bad for morale. So he cuts R&D and keeps his executive bonuses. The company looks stable, right until the bank pulls its credit line.
He mistook silence for success. I like that. What's the second one?
Analogy 2, the high-rise that forbids repair reports. You live in a luxury building, but you're forbidden from reporting leaky pipes or cracking walls because it might hurt the building's image.
The collapse isn't an accident. It's an inevitability.
It's the direct result of suppressing feedback. And the last one, my favorite. The driver who hates the GPS. A driver is on a long trip, but he ignores all the warnings about traffic jams and road closures, calling the GPS foreign influence.
The crash isn't the road's fault. It's the driver's fault for seeing the warning system as the enemy.
Precisely. So if you want to pull this entire complex situation down into one single thought for people to chew on.
Give it to us.
When power stops serving the people and starts serving only its own security, the nation becomes just like a company waiting for market elimination.
Phew. Okay. After all that, I have to say, sitting here drinking a latte, just talking about this stuff, it feels like a real luxury.
It is.
I know 2026 is barely 2 weeks old, but the world has already given us so much shock education. But I guess on the bright side, it means we're literally watching the gears of history turn in real time.
I think so. And, we talked about a lot of big, grand things today, geopolitics, regime change, shockwaves. But at the end of the day, all of this turmoil comes down to countless ordinary people.
People just like us.
People just like us fighting for a life that feels a little more human. And no matter how big a regime is, eventually, it has to answer to those small, real human needs.
All right, I think that's a good place to leave it for today. On Sip and Talk, whatever day of 2026 it is for you, we hope that while you're keeping up with world events, you also remember to order yourself your favorite dessert. Give life a little sweetness.
Stay calm and keep observing. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. Oh, Sonny, you're buying the dessert since you just talked about cherishing simple happiness.
I don't think there's a logical connection there.
Too late. And for all of you listening, please be sure to subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast. And you should also check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life.
Oh, Mickey's latest vlog.
It had me crying, laughing. I don't know how one person can encounter so many small disasters on one trip. You all have to go watch it. We'll see you next time.